well, I'd like to welcome everyone in Jesus' name again this morning. It's good to be with you again. And some of your faces last evening, I looked at you, but I didn't know, and now I know a little bit better. So that is nice, and it's good to get to know you a little better. Let's turn to 1 Peter 4. The title is AI and Living in the Last Times. And we noted last evening that we're going to keep looking at 1 Peter 4 because it is good advice, explicitly noted to be good advice for living in the last times. So we're just going to read 1 Peter 4. Once again, exactly the same verses we read it before, but 1 Peter 4 and verse 7. But the end of all things is at hand. Be ye therefore sober, and watch unto prayer. And above all things have fervent charity among yourselves. For charity shall cover a multitude of sins. Use hospitality one to another without grudging. As every man hath received the gift, even so minister the same one to another as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. If any man speak, let him speak as the oracles of God. If any man minister, let him do it as of the ability which God giveth, that God in all things might be glorified through Jesus Christ, to whom be praise and dominion forever and ever. Amen. Beloved, think it not strange concerning the fiery trial which is to try you, as though some strange thing happened unto you. But rejoice, inasmuch as ye are partakers of Christ's suffering, that when his glory shall be revealed, ye may be glad also with exceeding joy. Now, one of the reasons I just find these couple of verses interesting is they're not the kinds of things you associate with preaching about prophecy. They're just a different set of things. It's kind of the things one would expect you do all the time just to be faithful. Scary end times news, rejoice. Scary end time news, keep on being hospitable to other people. Scary end time news, really love each other. And I think that is why this is such an excellent passage, and the whole book of 1 Peter is excellent advice for living in the last days. Now, if we'll notice, Peter thought he was living, am I reading that right? Peter thought the end of all things was at hand in his day. So what are the last times? Or I'm not going to, launch into a long prophecy message, but apparently from the time of Peter to now, the whole time of when Jesus was working in the world through the gospel is at least included in that, and we are as well. There's a couple slightly oddly worded things. Verse 11, it says, if any man speak, let him speak as the oracles of God. Another way might say, if you have something to say that's from the Lord, preach it and say it like it comes from God. Another one is, if you serve, just serve like as ability God gives you. And that's what I want to, everything we say this morning, I like to just be immersed in those kind of things. This past Thursday, I had our work vehicle. We bought a newer work vehicle. And as I pulled out of the driveway, I pressed a button on my steering wheel and said, call La Bourmex restaurant. And it just took a few seconds. And on my GPS, it started giving me directions to La Bourmex. And just like one of the brothers said,
AI can be both genius and totally ignorant. I mean, I asked it to call Labormex, but impressively enough, it gave me instructions on a nice 12-inch screen, touch screen on my car. And so I'm like, okay, that's good enough. So I just pushed the button again, call Labormex. And within seconds, I was on the phone with the Labormex restaurant just down the road from our office. Or you could pull out a very modestly priced Android phone and take a picture of some scribbles that someone else did, not even in that good penmanship, and very quickly copy the text or the phone number they had written down into your phone and make a phone call. We're getting so used to taking pictures of things that the other evening we had revivals a week or two ago, and we have prayer before it, and so I made when we take prayer requests, and I figured I'll make a copy of the list so new people that come, I can just hand them a piece of paper. And we are so used to taking pictures of things, I handed this piece of paper to one of the younger brothers, and he immediately pulled his phone out to take a picture. I said, no, I'm giving you can have the paper. And it actually took him about 30 seconds till he realized that he could have the paper. We are so used to it's so handy just to take pictures of things. My dad, Warren, has very low visibility. And so our family purchased him an Alexa. And he can now just speak to it whenever it's sitting in the middle of his living room. And he can speak to it. He can get it to read the Bible, get the weather. And as he is very wont to do, when I visit him, he always has researched some new thing. But it gives him the ability, even without visibility, to do a lot of things. Very naturally. He does it all just by talking. All of these are examples of things that have been enabled by AI. And not only are they enabled by AI, they are things that you're thinking, most of you are thinking, this is just normal things that we do every day. It's just how we do things. And you might have a question in your mind, as I did, why bother having a topic about AI? And I did. I've heard different people asking for this topic other than just Terry and whoever else is on the committee. And so I had that in my mind. So I was asking some different Mennonite ministers and people I would meet, what do you think about AI? And one response I got, it's just the latest sensational thing to talk about. Or, I think we just heard it this morning, it's not all it's cracked up to be. Sometimes it's a genius, and sometimes it just falls in its face. Then I talked to another fellow minister, and he said, well, since AI came along, he's backing away from modern tech because he's just concerned where it's going. So we have everything from, it's just, why would you even worry about it, to highly concerned. Another one said that artificial superintelligence will have to be demonic. Now, let's be clear, there is nothing like artificial superintelligence yet. It's just something that people think about in the future. Even if we are not planning to use AI, we will most likely need to live alongside it. Almost 100%. It's a little hard to escape it because it's gathering information on the real world. You don't really escape it. It's a little hard to do that. So I want to thank you for being interested and thoughtful about influences in our modern lives. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to think about the subject and maybe give a few thoughts back to you. I'll admit I fell a little on the side of why is this something we might even take an hour to think about? But then I started doing some reading, and I realized that the CEO of OpenAI, which is the recent ChatGPT that was released, was made by OpenAI. there was a congressional hearing, and he was asked some questions. And one of the things he did respond, he said, I have to admit, I'm a little bit scared of AI. And so then I'm thinking, okay. And doing a little digging, I realized that a lot of people, researchers and scientists involved in AI, they do have some concerns. As a matter of fact, in August of 2017, researchers and CEOs of AI companies met, and they came up with something called the Alice, I'm not even sure how to say it, Alice Samar AI principle. Basically, a list of 23 principles that companies and researchers ought to consider as they develop AI. And it includes a section on ethics and values. They should think about safety, personal privacy, liberty, shared benefits, that humans can control it, and thinking about things that what happens when it's used for the military. And that's just, there's 23 of them, and that's only a few of them. So concerned enough that in 2017, they started thinking about what they ought to do to develop it correctly. And then in, if I'm thinking right, November of 2022, OpenAI, the company that I mentioned previously, they launched ChatGPT. And I'm not sure if that's what really got it in people's minds, but it's really a tool that anybody can use. You can type in a question and get an answer. Any normal person, just anybody can do it. And I think that really put it on the radar that people were thinking about it. And then in March 2023, once again, 33,000 a bunch of well-known AI scientists, CEOs, and thinkers wrote an open letter to companies developing AI and said, we call on all AI labs to immediately pause for at least 6 months the training of AI systems more powerful than GPT-4. So there's some concern there. I'm not sure where it all comes from, but when I read this, I think, well, then, if they're that concerned, maybe we should be thinking about this. And it seems like it just keeps getting ratcheted up. And then in May 2023, another statement was released by very well-known CEOs of Google, Google's DeepMind project, OpenAI, and Bill Gates, and others. They said this, just a one sentence, mitigating the risk of extinction from AI should be a global priority alongside other societal scale risks such as pandemics and nuclear war. So really ratcheting up the concern about this. And so on the one hand, I have myself thinking, well, what's the big deal? On the other side, these people that are super concerned about it. What should we think about it? Well, the thing I think about, but conservative Mennonites likely won't be deciding which AI gets implemented throughout the world. So why bother even thinking about it? We aren't the lawmakers. We're not going to even vote. If there be legal laws that would come up to try to control it or something, we don't even vote. And we're not influential scientists or CEOs of major AI companies. And we probably weren't even paying attention when they came up with those principles on how to restrict AI. But as a fellow Mid-Atlantic minister said, one of the people I asked a question, who is increasingly he's kind of trying to get away from, however you do that, get away from using modern tech. He noted, we went back and forth, and he said, I agree that it does appear that we must walk alongside this tech and be as faithful as we do, and be faithful as we do, redeeming the time and tech. So I guess he's getting out of it, but he's going to let it to maybe some of the rest of us to redeem it. A few things that I think we should remember as we think about this. God is on the throne, and Christ is at the right hand of God. I don't think we need to feel fear or undue concern. God is on the throne. And number two, God has created humans in his image it reminds us that God has created humans in his image with a great capacity for creativity. They can make very intriguing things. And that puts my mind back to God. He's created humans in amazing ways. Our primary, if we're the type that maybe are getting a little bit alarmed, our primary response to an unknown future should not be fear, anxiety, isolation, and hoarding survivalist mentality, but soberness, joy, hospitality, and fervent love for others. Remember what 1 Peter told us. The way to live in the end times when there's a lot of threatening things around us is not to, I think one impulse is to, we're going to take care of ourselves and we're going to hoard things and we're going to survive this. But no, what does 1 Peter tell us? We ought to be sober, we ought to have joy, we ought to be showing hospitality to others and have fervent love for other people. And maybe if we're the type that tend to maybe dismiss it a little as sort of pretty much all an overkill, maybe we need to think about walking soberly and with great discernment in a world that is influencing us. Maybe talking a little more about what it is. What is it? Rosalind and I recently were on a trip to a tech conference in the UK, and we had the opportunity of visiting Bletchley Park. And Bletchley Park is the place in the UK where some of the first computers were built, and they were mechanical. So there was a computer history museum there. And one of the men that worked at Bletchley Park trying to decode basically it was the whole facility was trying to decode messages of the Germans. And so it took tons of work to decode these things. And this one man, Alan Turing, he said, you know what, we could maybe put machines to this work. I mean, it takes people weeks and weeks to decode this one message. Maybe we get a machine to do this. And so they started making machines, and some of the first machines, they were very mechanical. They had little motors, and they would spin things, and like the little calculator, sort of in that same theory at least, it would calculate and they could figure out these codes. But in 1950, when computers still were hardly even a thought, this Alan Turing that was working on decoding these codes, he asked the questions. Could a future computer think? He was already asking this in 1950. The person credited with first using the term artificial intelligence was a computer scientist named James McCarthy. And he coined the phrase to describe the purpose of a study group he convened at Dartmouth College in the summer of 1956. And he was tasked for assembling experts to find out how to make machines solve the kind of problems now reserved only for humans and improve themselves. So what they were going to do is get together in 1956, is have this conference, and I have an imagining, I kind of could imagine a couple Mennonites hearing about this conference and saying, what are those crazy guys doing up there saying that someday computers are going to solve the kinds of problems that people can only do now? I could almost imagine that. And McCarthy defined intelligence as the computational part of the ability to achieve goals in the world. At the conference, they defined a couple broad categories of AI that are still in use today. The first one is artificial narrow intelligence, and pretty much that one is to define is kind of the AI as we know it today. Almost everything that we use, and some of it we use in everyday life, is AI. It can do one thing and do it pretty good. It can do one thing and do it pretty good. The other thing that they talked about that at conference is building something called artificial general intelligence. And artificial general intelligence is something that can do anything a human can do and do it very good. Now, that is not something they achieved. They achieved number one. Like when we all were thinking this is probably baloney and weird and crazy, they achieved artificial intelligence. And maybe the way my definition for artificial intelligence might go something like this. Allowing machines to do things that seem human-like. speak out loud, like they can get a text and speak it out loud, or they can listen to the spoken word and turn them into text, or they can see pictures and recognize things in the pictures. And maybe from previous input, they can respond to complex questions that sounds like humans learning something and then stating it back not exactly like it learned it. Maybe using some kind of creative flair. So doing things that previously mostly humans could do. I can remember the day in I forget when it was, 1992, I think, or in the 1990s, a company came out with a product called Dragon Naturally Speaking. And this was software that was incredibly amazing. You could sit at your computer and just talk to the computer, and it would type for you. It would just type out what you said, and it was so lame. Like half the time it wouldn't, but it kind of worked, and it was amazing. It was kind of like talk to another person, and they'd type it for you. So AI, maybe a simple way to think about it is computers doing things that seem human-like. The last, I don't know that at this conference in 1956 that they thought about this, but since then, philosophers have gone to another stage of AI, or at least they talk about it. And this is artificial superintelligence. And at the moment, philosopher David Chalmers argues that artificial general intelligence, in other words, making a computer that can do almost anything a person, or do everything a person could do, is very likely the path to superhuman intelligence. And superintelligence is a hypothetical agent that possesses intelligence far surpassing that of the brightest and most gifted human minds. Now, these last two, we have one, and that is computers doing things that are kind of human-like in one area. The other two that we talked about, and those are the ones that most people are fearing. They're fearing this thing that can come along and do anything a human can do. Well, you can see some challenges that could come up with that. This idea of one that could be smarter than any human, there's nothing like that. And you will read scientists that are afraid of that kind of possibility. The fact of the matter is, the others are just ideas. They have not happened, although, and I think I'm quite skeptical this will ever happen, but I know if I had lived in the 1950s, I would have been as skeptical of the other one as well. So it puts a little pause on me. I have questions and I have reasons I'm a bit, at the moment, only God has created humans to have general intelligence. At the moment, that's it. There's no machine that has general intelligence. And only God himself is the only super intelligent being. I.G. Good maybe talks about the problem that a lot of scientists and AI CEOs kind of worry about is this runaway self-improving machine that results in a superintelligence that possesses intelligence far surpassing the brightest and most gifted human minds. When you hear their fears, they're often talking about that, and it doesn't exist. That point when that thing would happen is often referred to as the singularity. And I'm going to soon be done talking about AI and what it is because I don't even understand it. But it's a hypothetical future point in time at which technological growth becomes uncontrollable and results in unforeseen changes in human civilization. That's what some are concerned about. But back to AI that we actually have. That, let's just remember and be exceedingly abundantly clear. Artificial general intelligence does not exist, and superintelligence does not exist. It's in the imagination of philosophers and scientists, and they're concerned about the possibility it could exist. But really, what we have today is AI. It can do one thing and do it pretty geniusly good in some cases. I know that we recently, we went with our mission board, some mission board members, we flew to Iraq, and it was over COVID, so we had to submit our photos and do a bunch of things so that, we have all our health things in order. And I think we were flying on Emirates, forget exactly which airline, but we came walking in, and when we came to where we check in, or when we boarded, nobody talked to us. There was a camera there, it saw us, and we just walked right on in. It's pretty efficient, pretty amazing. I was like, wait a minute, where's the person that's checking us into the flight here? It was just automatic. The camera saw us, recognized us. I'm like, how did that thing know who I am? I'm like, that's right, we did submit our photos. Apparently that's what they used to do it. Self-driving cars. I talked, yesterday night, I talked about how amazed I was that I rented this cheap little rental car and it could take me 50 miles without me hardly doing anything. But I have a cousin who has a Tesla, and I recently said that we were at a family guy. I said, could you take me can I drive your Tesla? I want to drive your Tesla. That just intrigues me to no end. He's like, come on, let's go. So we got in his car, and I was still thinking about my cheap rental car where you have to kind of do everything. Okay, put it on autopilot. And he said, now one thing we have to do here, it watches that the driver is paying attention. So what he did is he flipped down a little photo in the camera so that it would think that he's paying attention even though he was doing other things. He did trick it a little there. But I was astonished. This is not just steering assist. It came up to a stop sign. I'm like, oh, that's right. He doesn't have to do anything to stop. It stops at the stop sign. And interestingly enough, it stopped about 10 feet before the stop sign. And then it just slowly creeps forward while it checks for traffic both ways. And once there's no traffic, it pulls out. And the one thing he said, Matt, you're going to have to realize, this thing is really funny. It has really funny driving style. He said it's a combination between a young guy and a grandma. Sometimes it really gooses the accelerator, and sometimes it's really creeping around just trying to check what's happening. And he was right. It was really weird, a combination of really aggressive and kind of really cautious. Then we were on one side of Ephrata, and we came to a traffic light, and you could see on the screen, it could see the light, it could see what color it was. It could see the speed limit signs. It sets the speed based on reading the speed limit signs. And I don't know if you know how it is to drive through Ephrata. There's cars on each side, and there's one place where the cars start, and it gets pretty tight. I'm almost, he was driving then, and I was like, wait a minute, you're not going to grab that steering wheel. But he said, oh, don't worry, I came through here already before, and it's no problem. And it drove 100% no help the whole way through all the lights in Ephrata until we got to the other side, till we got to the sheets. And of course, we plugged it in, charged a little. And then on the way home, he said, now you can not drive. So what do you do when you get in a car and you're like, take it for a not drive? Anyhow, so I took it for a not drive. And the one thing I had to get a little used to is just letting it do its thing. It's a little creepy, like you feel like you need to help it. And another thing is knowing when it's doing the driving and when you're doing the driving. Like he said, there's a light here, and you have to keep an eye on it, because if you take control, then it gives it to you, and then it's not doing it. So keeping that, but super impressive. The one thing that was really unsettling to me is it had a very different driving style than I do. And I wasn't thinking about it, but artificial narrative, doing one thing and doing it pretty amazing well. Virtual assistants. I think last night, on October 4, 2011, Apple CEO Tim Cook would announce a brand new family member. It wasn't a new computer, an iPad, or even a brand new iPhone. The biggest release that day was a new feature for the iPhone. This feature would soon infiltrate our homes, cars, offices, and even our bedrooms. Our new family member would be named Siri, and she would change our lives forever. And I'm not sure if he said that or not. In between, that sounded like something maybe he didn't say. But it is true, and we did a little survey, and I realized not too many people have Siri. My family, I don't either, but a lot of my family members have used Siri all the time. But I think here we're using Google Assistant, and it's pretty much the same thing, if I notice the hand raising. And of course, in my car, when I use my car, I have an Android phone, so it uses Google Assistant as well. But These are artificial intelligence. Some we use more, some yes, but it's a part of our lives. What are things that we should think about? And I have 6 items that we probably should be at least thinking about. The first one I have is thinking about Matthew 7 and verse 14. We are walking on the narrow way. And so the first one that I think about as I think about AI involved in our lives, and that is, how do we interact related to values? Can the tool we use be made to express our values? If the tool does not have the settings or configuration to conform to our values, perhaps it's a tool we don't need. And I'm raising this as a question. There's no, in the minutes that we have, I'm not going to solve all the ethical problems with AI and all the challenges. It's just going to be a launching point for you all to figure it out more. ChatGPT, Alexa, Facebook's ad algorithm, YouTube video algorithms, Instagram kinds of things. If we can't make it fit our values, I wonder more and more if we should be a bit skeptical. Immature, one of the things I realize as we work with companies, and full disclosure, we do actually help companies use AI, and we have for multiple years already. We have a contact center, and that is when there's a big company, you call in and then you talk, you go through all these menus and then you talk to an agent. And what we have done for years already is listen to the conversation and transcribe the text, and also said the sentiment of what the people on the phone call are having. So managers of a contact center, they want to know if their agents are saying nice things or not so nice things. And we've done that for years. And as we work with businesses, we note very quickly what companies want to do is they want to customize AI to fit their values. They're very interested, extremely interested in making it have their values. And shouldn't we as Christians, who have very, very specific values, also be highly interested in that? Are we being a little too glib when we don't think about that? And I don't have all the details fleshed out, but that's one question I have, or one thing that we might want to think about. Number 2, and that is related to truth. In John 18 and verse 38, Pilate asked the question, what is truth? And I think we find all of ourselves asking this question more and more in the time that we live. At the moment, ChatGPT generated answers can sometimes be hard to tell what is randomly generated to sound like a right answer and what is a truly genius response. They both look so similar. One person that I asked his thoughts on AI, a fellow minister from Ohio, he said, I dislike how it minimizes the importance of the source, or in some case does not even include the source at all. And I know we as people, we're a very oral people. We're about talking and speaking to one another, and that means we have kind of minimized sources as well. But as we live in the age we live, we really need to think about where the source of our information is and where it's coming from. We don't want to come to church and say, I saw something on the internet. We just don't want to do that. Where did what we're saying come from? One tech speaker that I recently heard noted that ChatGPT is designed to be a good conversation partner, but not an accurate search engine. I think I heard someone say something like it's not even as good as a search engine, and they're not designed to be. It's designed to be a good conversation partner, not necessarily a perfect search engine. And a way to maybe think about GPT is as a young assistant that you need to review everything they say for accuracy. That might be a good way to think about it. With the ability to create images, and I don't know if I even said that, another thing that you can do with GPT or with AI is you can type in the words and explain an image, and it can create a photorealistic image of what you described. It's incredibly impressive. I know I said, make me a picture of 3 disciples that are really surprised, and it made me the picture. And it can do it with incredibly photorealistic detail. And it's nothing. It looks like perfect, like a human that doesn't exist. Is it real? What is real? And even if we don't create AI images ourselves, can we be discerning when we see images that reinforce what we really want to believe, but they aren't true? Did you hear what I said? I think where we really fall in a trap is we want something to be true, and now we have an image to prove it. We have to be very careful. I think that's where we can get, as sober people, we need to be serious about the sources of our information. And maybe I'll just keep moving. The next one, number 3. I think about the power of new technology. And I'm going to go the whole way back to Exodus 21 and verse 29. And I'm not going to quote the whole thing, but part of that verse says, if your ox is wont to push, if the things you have a tendency or have the potential to harm somebody, who is responsible for it? Yes, a knife can be used for surgery or as a weapon. And Bill Gates has famously noted that nuclear energy or nuclear weapons have resulted from the ability to modify nuclear. It can be both promising and dangerous. And one of the things that we realize with a lot of technology, it has dual uses. It can be used for good things or bad things. And if it's really powerful, what do we do with that? I know, forget when it was, a few years ago when we were traveling, and I don't have an exact date, we were flying through Athens. And as we were walking through the airport, we walked past, as they have all these stores and they're trying to sell this and that, and this one store was trying to sell watches. And as we walked past it, one of the watches stuck out to me. And I told Rosalind, I'm almost convinced that I saw a Mennonite fellow at my church wearing that watch 30 years ago. And it was a digital watch. And I said I'm going to bring things along. And as a matter of fact, I actually brought one along. It's the Casio F91W. And I'm curious. I was so convinced that I saw this thing, and so I went on Google and started checking. And sure enough, the Casio F91W is the most sold watch in the history of the world. And I'm kind of curious if anyone is wearing one this morning. About 3 million of them are sold a year, and it's been sold since do I have the date here? Since 1989. So there's about 120 million Casio F91Ws out in the world. And so when I walk past it and I recognize it, there was a reason I recognize it. It's like this super, just classic digital watch. It's popular for its low price, long battery life, and it has a really nice stopwatch. It has an awful light. At night I can't even hardly read the thing. But super popular and super ubiquitous. It's everywhere. It's 3 million units sold a year, and it makes it the most sold watch in the world. Its ubiquitous use in the construction of timers for terrorist bombs prompted the U.S. officials to view the wearing of these watches as the sign of Al-Qaeda. I promise you that I'm not. And neither were the many other Mennonite people that I remember wearing it from my youth. One notable case of the F91W being used as a timer was in 1994 when Al-Qaeda bomb maker Ramzi Youssef used the timer function for a 4-hour delayed detonation of an explosive charge left under the seat of Philippines airline Flight 434. He placed the bomb just slightly wrong, and instead of hitting the gas tank, it kind of blew in. It did not destroy the plane, but it did blow up. And the reason this thing is it's with just a few diodes and a 9-volt battery, you can turn this thing into an electronic timer using the stopwatch that's built in. So whoever thought that an F91W Casio watch could be a bomb timer? You know, we have the ability now with AI, and it's not incredible, to summarize, to first of all make a phone call into text, and then to summarize the phone call. So you have an hour of people talking back and forth, and you say, well, I just want 5 points to summarize the conversation. It does it really amazing. I just did it yesterday. I don't have to listen to an hour. I can start dreaming about how you could minimize meetings. You know, one of the power of AI is a lot of data is being collected. And in the past, you couldn't really use it. It was just like this. Actually, if you blow enough of data at somebody, it's meaningless because there's so much of it. But now with AI, it's possible to make it meaningful and summarized, which gives a lot of power to the people using it. How will we use the power that we have? How will others use it? It's a question we might ask. You know, Martin Milan, he was a Mennonite in colonial America in Lancaster County. And he is known to have been the inventor of the famous American long rifle. I don't know if you knew that a Mennonite in Lancaster County invented the American long rifle, also known as the Kentucky rifle. You know, what we build may be used for purposes other than what we thought when we built it. And so what do we do with how do we handle our powerful tools? How do we handle them? Well, one of the things I think about, and you'll probably think of more, they're not for children. You don't give extremely powerful tools to children. And also, as Exodus, who would have known that Exodus could inform us in the AI age? But you know what? You know what you were supposed to do when you had dangerous things in Exodus? You're supposed to have fences and barriers to make them safe. And I don't know if we can apply that to filters on the internet or maybe filters on AI, however you might do that. But we need it. And another thing that it reminds us is that if we own it, if we own an ox, or if we own a pit, or we own a house without a fence, we are responsible for the damage it does. Is that a fair reading of Exodus? Number 4, another thing that I've heard is how do we maintain a proper objective distance from some of the things around us, some of the influences around us? Revelation 18:4 says, "Come out of her, my people." 1 Peter 5 and verse 13, just a few pages ahead of where we read, Peter greets the saints that are living in the heart of Babylon. You know, there's some that say, wow, we have all these things. Maybe we need to move to the mountains. Do we need to move to the mountains? Do we have to try to escape all cameras? What is our response? Even Revelation does not seem to indicate an expectation that the saints would move out of the 7 cities of Asia. That's one thing I think about. You know, yes, come out of Babylon, but it might mean you're still living in Babylon. The perpetual challenge of living in the world but not of it. What does it mean to live in but not of the world? And one person who takes a fairly dim view of tech, that a friend of mine, he said, I'm just concerned that we don't get too involved in things of this world that may deceive us or lead us astray. What might be some guidelines to somehow maintain a proper objective distance from some of these things? And I just will give some that came to my mind. Maybe, and I'm kind of repeating myself, not have too close to us what isn't our values. And I don't know how we all do that. I'm giving it as an idea. Maybe another thing, we sometimes think about the evil thing in the future and we forget about the thing that's with us right now, and that is, are we welcoming entertainment into our personal space that isn't our values right now? Are we doing it already? Maybe another thing, how tightly do I hold to the high lifestyle that we all have right now? Am I holding it a little loosely? Do I hold my money, rights, assets with a fellow servant smiting attitude? I'm going to keep them and you're going to get smitten if you try to get between me and my assets and rights and money. Can I occasionally practice saying no to some of these things? Get practice in saying no. Maybe another thing, and maybe I need to give an example, but cross-check ourselves with the past and other geographies. Like, what did people in the past think about this kind of thing? And what do people who live in other geographies think about how we're handling things? Maybe another thing, can we change our mind if we make a mistake on what we allow? Maybe we do decide to allow something, but then we change our minds. A disciplined life is one where we have the ability to say no and exercise that ability regularly. How do we respond? And this is one of the last one that I kind of thinking about in relation to the thing. Maybe so that how do I respond when a ruler or governors take our rights and make our lives less ideal? Is that another test to see if our life is getting a little too cushy? Interesting, 1 Peter also talks about that. What about when governments use AI to become overbearing in their rule? 1 Peter 2 and verse 13 says, submit to every ordinance of man. And I immediately think the reasonable ones, right? 1 Peter 2 and verse 18, just a few verses later. Even unreasonable masters. And I find it interesting that in 1956, I said, check with the past. If you're not quite sure you're getting your bearings right, it's good to check with the past. And so I have the 1956 Lancaster Conference Discipline. And I read in here, and it says a very interesting thing. It says, and I'm probably not going to find it quick enough here, but it says that we need to obey governments, whether they are our government leaders, whether they are reasonable or unreasonable. I don't know what that all means for today. But what if a government uses technology they have to enforce what you may buy to eat? Would that be a time we could say, you know what, that's enough. They can't tell me what I can buy and eat. Would that be? I'd kind of think that might be a line that would be one that maybe we could say no to. And I was just reading a history of Mennonites in Lancaster County, and indeed, the government asked precisely this. They didn't have AI to enforce it, but they did enforce it in World War II. There's some things you couldn't buy. I like sugar in my coffee. At that point, I think you could just get a certain amount of it. The government controlled what food you could buy. What if the government uses technology to have to enforce, what if they tell us we need to haul their cargo for free? What if they would say, make a law, you know what, Mennonites, they need to haul our cargo and free, just whatever we want. They have to haul it. Would we say, that's the line? Well, turn to Matthew 5. If they asked you to carry their pack for a mile, you carry it 2. What does that mean for today? I think there's questions about, social credit. And I often hear this concern that, maybe a government will use this idea of social credit to control us. And this is a thought that came to me. Governments have always rewarded what it approves and disrewarded what it does not approve of. Is that correct? They didn't just do it in the past, they always do it. And another concern I sometimes hear is, the point that the government is powerful. What if the government become powerful enough to control us? Did you know that the very definition of government is an entity that is powerful enough to control us? That is the definition. Otherwise, they couldn't control criminals. Perhaps the prosperity, health, ease that in some ways has been brought to us by a technological world has delivered something else that has already changed us. We're talking about being aware of being changed. In the 1954 discipline, we were really convinced that we obey the government, whether reasonable or unreasonable. But has our extremely easy life modified us so that we're not quite so sure we're ready to give up some of the things that make our lives just pretty nice? Number 5, privacy. And the verse I have attached to this one, so one of the things that we think about related to AI is privacy. And the verse I have is Acts 2 and verse 44, and that is somewhat related to what we have in 1 Peter, having all things in common. Interestingly enough, one of the biggest concerns about AI that I hear among religious folks is related to privacy. And interestingly enough, the Bible does not specifically address concepts of privacy that we have today. It's just not something that it talks about. But it does raise questions about who knows us best. So we often worry about the thing that it doesn't talk about, and maybe don't think about so much the thing that it does talk about. What about when Amazon or Facebook or Google Assistant knows us better than our ministers or our brothers and sisters? Another thing I related to this item of privacy, I think that as we go forward, there's going to be more thinking about this whole concept of privacy, and people are going to come out at different places. We're going to have different thoughts on it because we don't have clear Bible guidance on it. And I think one of the things we're going to really have to think about is respecting each other's privacy in proper ways. What do I mean by that? I forget how long ago it was already, but at Mid-Atlantic, we have a book that has every last family and child and person listed in it. And some of the ministry thought it'd be really nice if we had this online so we could just, go and take a look. And there was a thought, someone came up with a plan on how you could get this thing online and make it really convenient. And when it was presented at our minister, total minister meeting, we realized that there's some people that, from a privacy perspective, just aren't comfortable with that. There will be difference on this issue. And as I already said, the Bible does not speak directly about it. And so this is probably a Romans 14 and verse 3 type issue. There are differences that are significant, but they're not fellowship breaking. How do we respect other people's privacy in proper ways? I know at home we have a Ring doorbell, and it's a doorbell that has a button and it has a camera. People can walk up to it, and if you're not at home, they can press the button and talk to your phone. But also, it can detect when there's motion and just take a video. So if someone comes to our porch, even if we weren't there, it takes a little video and you can look at it. And we have noticed that when our mail lady comes, when she comes, she has her mail thing and she goes like this as she comes up and puts the mail in. And I didn't get a chance to chat with her yet, but she obviously doesn't like it. What ought we do in that kind of a case? We need to honor questions and differences in relation to this. I don't think we can escape that. But there's some other things that I hear that are more concerning and I'm not sure are good. I sometimes hear a thought along these lines, and if I don't get it right and you kind of hold it, then we'll kind of try to straighten it out. But I kind of hear ideas along this line. Some are concerned about future control. Some who are concerned about future control sometimes seem to advocate for being secretive today. So you're going to do something today that maybe in the future you'll get in legal trouble for it in the future. Something you're doing, some good thing, but because they don't like it in the future. And some people say, well, we need to be very careful and don't, maybe don't say real, just be quiet about the truth. And my question is, how is this not allowing fear of the future, of future control to control us today? It's counterproductive. You're actually bringing the thing that you fear that may never happen into the present. And I think we have to somehow avoid that. There will be increasing regulation around companies and how they handle other people's data. And I don't know if there's any company here who's already bumped into it. We do. Since we work with European companies, they have a regulation in Europe called GDPR. And this is a government regulation that tries to be very careful about people's private information. And it's really onerous regulations. And do you see an interesting thing shaping up? On the one side, we want our data to be extremely private, and on the other side, we hate government regulation that achieves that. How do we navigate that? Will Mennonite businesses be careful with the privacy of other people's data that they collect? Will we be willing to obey regulations that are trying to protect both our and other people's privacy? And finally, number 6, human value. Loving God and loving our neighbor is just an absolute number one job of the Christian. And one of the ways we love our neighbor is by avoiding being respecter of persons. I know one of the concerns around AI is that it will cause people to lose their jobs. And it's true. Technology does eliminate jobs. I think I just heard a dairy fellow that I'm not sure if you need less milking people or not, but probably. You can get at least more done. One of the things I've noticed, so that fear about losing jobs, it seems like often what happens is people just do more. They're enabled to do more rather than people losing jobs. But it could come to that. People could lose jobs. That's a possibility. But we will value them anyway. We don't value people because they can have a high-paying job, right? And if we need to, if it does get terrible, we'll help each other. That's what we're here for. We don't need to fear that. And so some concluding observations, and I realize I'm going over time. Conforming our lives to God's kingdom will take effort. And let's put it forward and do it. What is true and real will likely, it's a good possibility it'll be harder to discern. I think we're already noticing that in some ways. Some jobs might be automated, but I think we can have confidence in the Lord. There will be increased challenges and regulations about privacy. And the government will continue to be powerful and very faulty. And somehow we have to work together to find a right way to respond to them. Thank you for your attention.
$813. $813. Let's sing the All Men at the end as well. Lord,
Thank you, Brother Matt, for that message this morning. I've very much been appreciating the way that he is giving points, whether you agree, whether you don't agree with AI, whether you use it or whether you don't, points to help us go through. And because like he said, we walk hand in hand with it, whether we use it or not. And I was thinking about one of the last points he made about AI taking away jobs. And that's something that went through my mind a number of times. How many jobs are we going to lose from this? And then I start to think about cars and trucks and backhoes and bulldozers and all the jobs they've taken away. Quite a few. Think about the building of the C&O Canal. Just something. Anyway, so we live with it, and it will be something we face, and so I appreciate the points on how to live with it. Can't add a lot more to it. Thank you for that. Thank you for your presence this morning. You're welcome back this evening for the last message. I see Eric in the back. Do you have any instructions on the fellowship meal? All right, so we will have a closing prayer. We'll include a prayer for the meal, and then they are ready for something we do well at, and we all do, and that's eat. All right, let's stand together for a closing prayer. Our Father in heaven, we thank you again for your word that is never out of date and will live into the future as long as this world lasts and can give guidance, give direction. Thank you for these times together, and I pray that our discussion and fellowship over the meal could be edifying and beneficial. Thank you for the food that has been provided and those that have shared. Bless them, bless us as we partake together, and would we fellowship and eat to your honor and glory. We pray that you'll dismiss us with your blessing. Grant us your peace. In Jesus' name, amen. You're dismissed.